Okay, thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Sharon, it looks to me like Fletcher is not in attendance tonight, and David is not here as of yet, although we expect, hopefully, him to join momentarily. The weather that's gone through has certainly created a turmoil, I think, maybe with some of our power and internet. If we lose power or internet, we'll wait about 5 minutes and then we'll reschedule the meeting if we have to. Tonight we have 2 items on the study session agenda, and Rachel, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and take over tonight in the study session. The first is the presentation from the Calhoun Park Committee, which was appointed some time ago, as you remember, to look at options for Calhoun Park. The committee has asked Ms. Trina Mackey to do the presentation tonight. She agreed and prepared the PowerPoint and back together. And this is the first time we've tried this. So here's hoping that it goes well. And if there's anything that is not correct or that fails, it's my fault. The second part of the agenda will be a discussion of council members about the Attorney General's opinion related to the Meriwether Monument. And just for council's information, there's been a lot of discussion amongst the committee as to whether or not that opinion would affect what the recommendations of the committee were. I think there are opinions on both sides of the question, but I asked the committee to proceed tonight with the report based on the circumstances as was in existence when the committee first was configured in March of 2019. If the Meriwether Monument discussion from the Attorney General changes in any way, certainly the council has the last decision-making authority. Tonight will be just a discussion, a presentation, and council alone will make any decisions at some point in the future based on the presentation and the recommendations from the committee, as well as an outcome of any action that was taken regarding the Attorney General's opinion. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Ms. Mackey, who will do the PowerPoint, and she and Rachel are working together on this. So again, this is our first time trying something like this. So if it gets messed up in any way or we have a glitch, we'll work through it. So go ahead, Trina.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. On behalf of the Calhoun Park Committee members, Charles Allen, Pat Carpenter, Tony Carr, John Thielak, Trina Mackey, David McGee, Millage Murray, Mandy Nelson, Mark Newell, and Bob Pettit, I respectfully submit the Meriwether Monument Committee report to Council. We have the Resolution 2019-19. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Trina, hold on 1 second.
My pleasure.
Get the there we go. Everybody can see that okay?
Yes, so you can advance to the next slide, the resolution.
All right, 1 second.
Resolution 2019-110 provided findings about the Hamburg incident of 1876 and appointed this committee to evaluate options for an additional display in Calhoun Park. We'll start with Calhoun Park. The Meriwether Monument has stood in the center of Calhoun Park since 1916, honoring the one white person who lost his life in the Hamburg Massacre in July 1876. The words on the monument.
Trina, she's one behind you, I think. The next one, Rachel.
Is this one correct?
Yeah, thank you. The words on the monument reflect the attitudes of the citizens of North Augusta at the dedication in 1916, but they clearly do not reflect the opinions and attitudes of North Augusta and its citizens today. Next slide. The Committee of Citizens believes permanent changes to Calhoun Park are necessary to affirm today's attitudes differ from those expressed on the Meriwether Monument and to explain the events that took place in nearby Hamburg in July 1876. The Hamburg Massacre occurred on July 8, 1876. A gun battle occurred between about 200 men from local rifle clubs and African Americans serving in Company A, 9th Regiment of the South Carolina National Guard, and others barricaded in a warehouse. 7 African Americans were killed, 4 of whom were executed. Those include First Lieutenant Allen Attaway, Corporal Nelder John Parker, James Cook, Albert Minard, David Phillips, Moses Park, and Hampton Stevens. The Hamburg Massacre was an historic event in our nation's history. It became a key issue in the disputed presidential election of 1876 between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel J. Tilden. The Electoral College votes from South Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana were contested, and ultimately a special congressional committee awarded all the contested votes to Hayes, enough to swing the Electoral College to him. Known as the Compromise of 1877, this agreement led to the removal of Northern soldiers from South Carolina, from the South, allowing white Southerners to successfully deny African Americans their rights. This bargain between Southern Democrats and the Republicans brought Reconstruction to an end by ending the Northern occupation of the South. Historical markers relevant to the city of Hamburg and the events which happened there in July 1876 are positioned at 2 locations in the city. The Carlsville area is a location of both a roadside marker about the Hamburg Massacre and a Hamburg granite memorial to the 8 men who died in the Hamburg incident of 1876. These were dedicated in March of 2016. The Clover Leaf at Route 1 in Martintown Road has 2 roadside markers providing information about the city of Hamburg and the Hamburg-Charleston Railroad. Phase 1. Position 3 interpretive panels to provide historical context of the events of July 1876 and the background information about why the Meriwether Monument is located in Calhoun Park. This initial phase to purchase and erect interpretive panels estimated to cost between $8,000 to $10,000. And this is what the interpretive panels would look like. Next slide. The first interpretive panel would include, after the Civil War, the nearby town of Hamburg, South Carolina became a town where free blacks and freed slaves settled. Important local government positions were held by African American leaders from the town of Hamburg. The most notable were Prince Rivers, Samuel Lee, and John Gardner. The 1868 South Carolina elections produced the first majority black state legislature in U.S. history. A new South Carolina Constitution was drafted. Aiken County was formed from parts of Edgefield, Lexington, Barnwell, and Orangeburg counties. It was the only county formed in South Carolina during the Reconstruction era from 1865 to 1877. March 10th, 1871 is celebrated as Founders Day in Aiken County. The middle interpretive panel would include the Hamburg Massacre occurred nearby on July 8, 1876. A gun battle occurred between about 200 men from local rifle clubs and African Americans serving in Company A, 9th Regiment of the South Carolina National Guard, and others barricaded in a warehouse. 7 African Americans were killed, 4 of whom were executed. The Black casualties were First Lieutenant Allen Attaway, Corporal Nelder John Parker, James Cook, David Phillips, Albert Minard, Moses Park, and Hampton Stevens. The sole white casualty was Thomas Mackey Meriwether. The Hamburg Massacre was a historic event in our nation's history. It became a key issue in the disputed presidential election of 1876 between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel J. Tilden. The Electoral College votes from South Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana were contested, and ultimately a special congressional committee awarded all the contested votes to Hayes, enough to swing the Electoral College to him. Known as the Compromise of 1877, this agreement led to the removal of Northern soldiers from the South, allowing white Southerners to successfully deny African Americans their rights. This bargain between Southern Democrats and Republicans brought Reconstruction to an end by ending the Northern occupation in the South. The third and final interpretive panel would state, in 1914, the South Carolina legislature passed a bill authorizing $400 for a headstone on the grave of Thomas Mackey Meriwether, the one white person killed in the Hamburg Massacre. A 1950 amendment authorized placing the monument within the town of North Augusta. Local leaders chose this prominent location as the site for the monument. Private funds supplemented the funds authorized by the SC legislature. The monument was dedicated February 16, 1916. Inscriptions on the monument reflect attitudes of people during that period. Those words do not represent the attitudes of the people of North Augusta today. We are a community of people of different races and ethnic backgrounds, bonded together by unity and common rights of citizenship. We choose to learn from our past and ensure that North Augusta's future reflects a high standard of all of its citizens. The events and legacy of Hamburg do not define us. Phase 2. Phase 2 suggests a sculpture in Calhoun Park with the theme, United to embody the conviction that our community consists of many races and cultures enjoying full rights of citizenship. It is important that the African American victims of Hamburg Massacre are honored in Calhoun Park in addition to the interpretive panels. An open design competition could be commissioned. The cost of a suitable sculpture will be in the range of $200,000. Shared public and private funding campaign. Finally, we strongly recommend active support, including a financial commitment toward development of an African American historical district in Carlsville. This does not necessarily mean formally an establishment of such a district, but that possibility should be considered. An initial step would be relocating the roadside markers providing information about the city of Hamburg and the Hamburg-Charleston Railroad to Carlsville. Council's decision to leave the Meriwether Monument unaltered shaped the conclusion that Calhoun Park should be the single location within the city focused on the historic Hamburg Massacre. The wishes of the African American community to have the marker and the memorial remain in Carlsville dictate that 2 separate areas will have descriptive information about the Hamburg incident. While this may not be the ideal situation, having the marker and memorial in Carrsville will provide an additional incentive for visits to Carrsville. Thank you. That concludes our two-phase recommendation to the council. Thank you for your time and consideration. Turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Well, thank you very much. It was well done. Our council, any comments or questions of Trina or John Felak is on? He can help answer them, or I can chime in. I think if go ahead, Eric.
So, I mean, that's a great idea on a lot of points, but the inscription is to remain on the monument. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, when this committee was constituted, we were waiting for the Attorney General's opinion, which we subsequently re-asked the question. And after the committee's work was essentially complete, and based on the assumption that the Meriwether Monument would remain, which was in the resolution which established the committee, that were the ground rules that the committee operated under. And any, obviously council has the ultimate authority to make a recommendation, and additional opportunities and options may be available in the future that were not a year and a half ago.
I assume that's what we're discussing after this, is what the Attorney General's decision was and what steps to take from there. And we would have more options, I assume, once we get a ruling.
That's correct. And I would anticipate that action would be completed following our whatever we decide to do in response to the Attorney General's opinion. Then subsequent to that, when we get an answer from the legislature or whatever, that then the final course of action would be, approved and discussed further by the council.
Okay, thank you.
Brooks.
Mr. Mayor, in Calhoun Park, there's a fountain. Is the fountain considered part of the monument?
Not in my understanding, Bob. It would just be the obelisk itself.
Well, that was my understanding as well. Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Carpenter.
Yeah, well, and I talked to you earlier today, but if we have other suggestions, we're not discussing that tonight, right? We will have a meeting to discuss with all council members.
Well, subsequently.
We just sort of accepting this tonight from the committee, correct?
That's correct. And then the ultimate decision and discussion, will follow at some point down the road. This was just wrapping up what the committee's work was.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Briefing it to you, and then the report. I think you received a copy of the report as well. And then evaluating options that are now maybe open to us, which weren't open to us earlier, and combining 2 or 3 of these with those new options is something I think that would be one of the things we would be discussing in the future.
Thank you.
Mayor, I don't have a whole lot to add to it. I appreciate the committee's work. I think under the context that you guys were operating on, that recommendation fits. I do think, as we'll discuss later, that the Attorney General's opinion probably opens that up and maybe puts some other options on the table that I would certainly like to discuss. But I don't have any specific. I think overall, other than to say I appreciate the work of the committee. Again, under the constraints that you all were operating under, I think the report is well done and well received under the constraints. So I just like to express my thanks on it, and that's really all I have at this point on it.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other comments. I think on behalf of the council, even though I was part of the committee, I certainly would, I'm certainly aware of the energy, dedication and inputs from all of the council members. As you well know, discussions of race and prejudice and things of that nature, certainly a part of the Calhoun Park now, oftentimes can be difficult. I appreciate the council members' willingness to be open and unafraid to express an opinion, and equally willing to listen to other opinions as they were presented. And that was, I think, key to ultimately arriving at this recommendation with the language. It was well thought out and discussed, and Mr. Phelak did a great job putting the first draft of the report together, enhanced it just a little bit. And Trina, we certainly appreciate you putting together the briefing tonight. I think having an opportunity to hear it and to see it adds to the understanding of the written document that each of the council members has been provided. So I'm very much appreciative of that. I know you're operating under a stress of working at home under these circumstances, and just like we're all virtually tonight, which you do every day, I think. So most appreciated to all who participated. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the second part of the discussion. Those who are on and wish to stay certainly may. Kelly, we're talking about the Attorney General's opinion, and if you want to go ahead and lead the discussion about options and what we might do. This again is just a discussion. No decisions will be made tonight. For those who might be watching in anticipation of something of that nature, there will not be any decisions made. This will just be an opportunity for council to understand what the Attorney General said, and from Kelly's broad background and understanding, give us some additional insight. So, Mr. Zier, it's all yours.
Okay, I think the first thing that I think that any of you that have read the opinion would acknowledge that the Attorney General has pretty much dealt with this, but make sure that everyone understands that the Attorney General's opinion is not law. It is an opinion. It may be better than an opinion signed by me, but it has no legal significance in a courtroom. I've been in cases where attorneys have mentioned Attorney General's opinions dealing with a point that has not really impressed judges at all. Others probably pay a little more attention to it, but it is a good document. I think the Attorney General has done a very good job in this case. They've really reviewed the matter, but it gives you, I guess, what I would call as much as anything, an unbiased opinion from the legal community, whereas most of the time you have attorneys on each side of an issue. Their job is to push their position of their client. And so obviously you have opinions there that there's some bias involved with. The theory behind an Attorney General's opinion is that it is attempted to be presented unbiased and deal with the matter. Now, in this case, in September of 2017, we first sent a letter to the Attorney General's office requesting that they provide information to us as to whether or not the Heritage Act applied to the Meriwether Monument. At that time, because there was a case pending in Greenwood, and I apologize for going back on some of this because we've discussed a little bit of it before, but I think it brings everything together at one time. So I want to talk about that just a little bit. at that time, the Attorney General's office advised us that there was a case in Greenwood, and that case had to do with a request by the mayor and people in Greenwood that they wanted to go into a park there and I think add to a monument the names of the African Americans that were killed in various wars, where the monuments that were there just had the names of the whites that were killed. As a result of that, there was an action filed. The Attorney General said, well, this action, we believe, will make a determination as to whether or not the Heritage Act is constitutional. And that as a result of that, they were not going to provide any opinions related to the Heritage Act until after that case was completed. Well, in that case, the trial judge and people, they did a very good job of avoiding the issue, and there was never a decision made about the constitutionality of the Heritage Act. And basically what was decided in that case, and I think that's a little important when you get to what our Attorney General has finally issued here, is that their position ended up being, well, that the monument that they were dealing with in Greenwood did not belong to the city, and it belonged to the American Legion in Greenwood. And as a result of that, the Heritage Act did not apply to it, and the American Legion could do whatever they wanted to with that statue. Well, there was an appeal filed to the South Carolina Court of Appeals, but there was not a request made that there be a stay in anything going on. And so while that appeal was starting to get in process, someone in Greenwood, and I don't know whether it was through the mayor's office or the city or whoever, they went in and did what they wanted to do. They added the names of all the African Americans that they were aware of that had been killed in the wars, put them on the monuments. Then somebody discovered that it happened, and at some point the trial judge was made aware of it, and he ended up issuing an order that just did away with the entire case, saying that it was moot, the matter had been resolved, there was nothing to be decided either by his court or by the appellate court, and that case was ended. And it was ended without a decision that tells us whether or not the Heritage Act. Now, after that, we sent a new letter to the Attorney General requesting, since that case was over with, that they now issue an opinion. And that was done in June of this year. A week or so after that, the Attorney General issued an opinion, not in connection with our request, but to Representative Mike Burns out of Greenville. And that opinion related to whether or not the Heritage Act was constitutional. And that Attorney General's opinion, done in June of 2025, made the determination that the Heritage Act was constitutional. And again, this is an opinion. That's not a decision by court. And so then we continued on, and we then received the response to our request from the Attorney General's office. Now, something that we did intentionally because we felt like there was a much better possibility of us getting the information that we need if we were not pursuing anything relative to the constitutionality of the Heritage Act. There's a doctrine in the law that's called constitutional avoidance, and basically it's where courts trying to deal with matters such as these, if they can reach a decision that does not call into question the constitutionality of acts by the legislature, that's what they try to do. And we anticipated that would happen in our situation. Basically, we sent our request to the Attorney General's office pretty much trying to hit on two areas that did not deal with constitutionality of the act itself. One was whether or not the Meriwether Monument was protected by the portion of the act that referred to monuments, memorials on public property that related to very specific wars. And those wars were the War of 1812, Mexican War, War between the states, Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, Persian Gulf War, Native American or African American, those were the wars. And our position is that this monument really relates to no war. The Attorney General, in the opinion that he has issued, basically agrees with that and takes the position that the Meriwether Monument does not relate to any of those wars, so that portion of the act would not apply to this monument. Then the act goes on further, dealing with saying no street, bridge, structure, park, preserve, reserve, or other public area of the state or any of its political subdivisions dedicated in memory of or named for any historical figure or historical event may be renamed or rededicated. So the issue that arises there is the Meriwether Monument dedicated to an historic figure or a historic event. Obviously, if the monument was in some manner dedicated to the Hamburg Massacre, riot, incident, whatever, it would certainly be an historic event and covered. But the belief is that the monument was dedicated to Thomas Mackey Meriwether and not specifically related to the Hamburg incident. So it appears to be protected, to not be protected there. But then you get into the issue of, was Thomas Mackey Meriwether an historic person or figure? Well, as a result of the interest that has arisen related to the monument in the last number of years, and then if you actually go back to the time when the monument was being prepared and authorized by the legislature, there becomes a factual question to be decided. Was Thomas Mackey Meriwether a historic figure? The Attorney General basically determined that as a result of the fact that the only thing that appeared to be historic was the fact that he lost his life in the Hamburg massacre, riot, incident. And as a result of that, he became historic. Now, the Attorney General's office, in their opinion, does not believe that he reaches that level because it's saying the really only real thing that there's any information on is the fact that he lost his life in Hamburg. And so if you look at those 2 points that we raised, the Attorney General's office essentially came back and said, we don't believe that it covers the monument on either one of those 2 points. But then they throw in which I was not expecting, but now going back and looking at what took place in Greenwood, they throw in that it is their position that the monument was authorized by an act of the legislature, financed by the legislature, but it ends up, I think, at best about half financed by the legislature, the other by private funds and things of that nature. Their position, the Attorney General's opinion is that it apparently belongs to the state of South Carolina. And I went back, the mayor and I talked about this a little bit, and I kept relying on, they said it was to be presented to the city of North Augusta and all that. But when you go back and read it a little more, there's certainly some argument that it was not purely presented, it was authorized, and we provided a place for it to be located. And so kind of a little bit going back to the Greenwood Circuit Court finding that monument in Greenwood belonged to the American Legion, the Attorney General's opinion is that this monument belongs to the legislature, and that we would not be authorized to make any changes to it, basically to the fact it doesn't belong to us. And we would have to, the act that created it in the legislature would have to be amended or something of that nature done. So that is the opinion from the Attorney General's office. I think it provides very good arguments to argue that the monument is not protected by the first two portions of the Heritage Act, dealing with the wars and then with historic figures and events. But it still is saying the city of North Augusta is not free to do whatever they want to do with it because it belongs to the legislature. And I think that's the crux of the opinion. Now, to me, the simplest thing that could be done would be to potentially request that the legislature advise us as to whether, in their belief and opinion, if this monument belongs to them, or if when it was delivered to the city of North Augusta, it was a gift to the city, and now it belongs to the city, which in some ways could be said it belongs to the cities, and it's the city's problem and not the legislature's problem. And that is one way that within the confines of the Attorney General's opinion, it would appear that we would be free to do what we want to do with it. But that is if the legislature were to do that, were to agree that it belongs to you, it doesn't belong to us. But even with that, what I would have to point out to you, if the city then decided that we wanted to do something with the monument, that remove it, sand it, do anything, deface it or change it, anyone that had an interest, and that interest I think would be to any citizen, and if they were of the belief that it violated the Heritage Act, they could sue the city, and then we end up in court for the courts to decide the issues just like we've dealt with all along. Another possibility, and I'm not at this point recommending this, and I would tell you, I think when we start dealing with potential litigation, at some time it probably would be appropriate for us to have an executive session for me to discuss with council matters related to potential litigation involving anything we might do with the monument, might do or might not do to the monument. But I think that, and that would certainly be a proper executive session because we would be discussing potential litigation. But the city could also bring what's known as a declaratory judgment action. And that's where you go to the court and say there is a current issue, and the terminology is a justiciable issue. And that means that something that needs to be litigated or is, probably will be you don't create hypothetical issues and take them to the court. You have to say, this is a real concern, a real issue that needs to be decided. And we could go to the courts and under a declaratory judgment, take the position that we need a determination from a court as opposed to just from the Attorney General's office. Does this act apply? And that is a way to get it to the courts, get it done. I would tell you that I would be of the opinion that in order to get that matter resolved, because if we did that, it would be interesting. I think the Attorney General would appear on behalf of the legislature or the state or whatever, and they would be involved in the litigation also, because you are interpreting a state statute. I would feel sure that an issue would be whether we would raise it or not, but there'd be an issue that would be put forward. Is it constitutional? And once that issue is put forward, it doesn't just involve the Meriwether Monument, it involves everything within the state. And I would tell you that I think that case would be drawn out, because there would be a number of parties that would would ask to be allowed to intervene in the case to become a plaintiff, defendant, or whatever. Whatever the decision is, it would probably be appealed. It would go to the Court of Appeals if the Supreme Court would not decide to take it original jurisdiction to them. But I'll be honest with you, I think you're talking about 2 years if you're talking about it being done that quickly. But those are just some options. We would need to talk about them. I think one of the things that's very good about the report from the committee is that as I see what they are requesting to be done is something that could be done immediately without litigation or without any contesting or any matters related to the Heritage Act. It's our park. It may be that the Heritage Act says we can't take down something that's in there or change anything on it. We certainly have the right to add new things to the park and do whatever we want to there. But as I say, I think that it may be a time for another meeting with council if there is any thought or that there is a potential for exploring litigation related to what we do. And again, I'm saying, I believe that if we try to do anything to the monument, that we're going to be faced with litigation from somewhere. And then that would create the process that I think would be long and drawn out. The other thing that certainly could happen is, and I don't think it's going to happen until January or February of next year, there's a lot of interest in this whole area right now, the concern about the Heritage Act and everything, that there's always the potential that the legislature may decide to review this matter and determine what they might want to do concerning the Heritage Act, and that would avoid all litigation. If the legislature chose to make some changes, they could do it with just by passing a bill, and there's no litigation involved. I think each of you has gotten a copy of the Attorney General's opinion, and it's very well written and well thought out and reviewed. And as I say, the information, the report that was provided earlier by the mayor was provided to the Attorney General's office for them to review when they did all this. And it's obvious that they did their homework and reviewed that. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions that you might have.
I appreciate the thorough discussion. It's kind of like, whew, it takes time to digest all the options, and obviously, we can't make a decision tonight, and even if we were able to, I think we all need to think about it a little bit, particularly as what the options may be to go back to the legislature, what questions we would ask them. But I'd be more than happy to listen to, and hopefully listen to what other people's opinions and thoughts are. Eric, I'm sorry. I was looking at Kevin. I saw your hand.
Kelly, from what I understand just from listening, it checks off two of the boxes as this does not apply. So really, it sounds like the only box that applies is it owned by the South Carolina legislator? Is that correct? Because if so,
that is correct based upon the Attorney General's opinion.
Right.
What I am saying is, if everybody accepted the Attorney General's opinion and the legislature said it doesn't belong to us, you do whatever you want to with it, we'd be clear. But let's say that we went to the legislature, asked them to release it, acknowledge that they have no ownership interest in it, and then we say, okay, now we've covered all three bases from the Attorney General's opinion, but the minute we start to do something, I would anticipate there's going to be a group or groups. And again, they're going to be concerned that if the city of North Augusta does something with the Meriwether Monument, saying it's not covered by the Heritage Act, that it's going to escalate around the state. And I would expect us to have litigation to try to prevent us from doing anything. Maybe wrong, and it would be great if we didn't. But I would be very much surprised if somebody didn't try to task us with that, and then we'd be in the courts dealing with it. And again, and I keep getting back to this, the problem is we're not just dealing with one monument that happens to be in Calhoun Park. We're dealing with something that people across the state are going to be concerned, are going to end up having impact in their communities, and those communities may feel differently than the people of North Augusta do, and they may try to get the monument protected by the Heritage Act.
And I understand that part, and forgive me, but I still feel like, though, even if we did everything legally, even if we went the proper channels, somebody could still sue us under some other false pretense. And I hate to think that happens, but I'm sure. You're an attorney, so you see it every day. People will sue for any little thing. So I don't know, but I do understand what you're saying. It's not just. It's almost like everybody wants to wait for the next city to decide, and then leave it at that. I just if it takes 2 years to go to proper channels, I would say personally I'd like to start with at least going to the state and saying, hey, is it your monument or is it ours?
See, one of the things we've tried to do to try to keep it from being something that applies to a lot of places around the state is to avoid any question about whether or not the Heritage Act is constitutional. We are trying to take a position, the Act's constitutional, it just doesn't apply to the Meriwether Monument. And that way, it just applies to right here, not anywhere else. And we may, if we can, get that, we may benefit. We may be able to get other people to say, okay, well, we're not going to worry about that because it doesn't directly impact the Heritage Act.
I have a question. Is it not possible, to avoid all of these issues by doing absolutely nothing to the monument, but create a new display that would totally obscure the monument? In other words, we would leave it alone, but it would make it very, if we created a different type of display that surrounded the Meriwether Monument and obscured it, would that not solve a lot of problems?
Well, as I said, there's no question. You can put a lot of other things in park. There's no control on that. The issue is, and let me see exactly some of the terminology on here. Well, for example, it says may not be relocated, removed, or disturbed. I'm wondering if the interpretation would be if you put something around it, doesn't touch the monument, but it's 4 inches away from it and you can't read what's behind it, I think there'd probably be an interpretation that it was disturbed.
I would think that would be much less of an issue than 2 years of litigation or dealing with the legislature.
That's why I say I think what the committee is suggesting is a no litigation procedure that I think could move forward without anything.
Kelly, and I'll just jump in here. And I thank you first and foremost for the explanation. Honestly, I've read through that letter numerous times since we've received it, and you've given me a lot to think about that I had not thought about before. If I had my way and my druthers, we would kind of take the Greenwood tact. And I know that I may be alone in thinking that on this group. We would just deal with the monument and hope that a court makes it go away. But I also realize that's probably just a little bit of the radical rebel in me saying that, and that's not a practical course of action. So I tend to agree with Eric's final statement that regardless of how we decide to proceed, which is going to be a process for us to go through and deliberate on as a body, whether that's to take the committee's recommendation. And, I'll say if that's something that the city can rally behind, it can be a unifying thing. Though it's not the way that I would want to handle it, I have a hard time leaving that monument, or at least the inscription on that monument, intact. If we cover it up, I'd maybe be okay if we could sandblast it off. I had somebody recommend chiseling it off. That would be my preferred path forward. But again, I realize that I'm not the dictator of city council. It's a deliberation that we have to make, and compromises and all that stuff that go through it. But I do think that I would echo what Eric said, and that it sounds to me that the first step, regardless of how we would decide to go, is to get a opinion, a ruling, or whatever you would call it, from the legislature, for them to clarify whether or not it's their belief that it belongs to the city or it belongs to the state. And while we're having these deliberations, let that request run concurrently, and then we at least have some clarification on that. And then maybe by that time, other things have happened. The legislature's taken an action on the Heritage Act. Who knows? But that at least gets the first step going forward while we're deliberating it. So, while we're doing that, and I've got all sorts of ideas. I don't think this is the forum to start just shotgunning ideas on what we think ought to happen with it at this point. I don't think that's the point of this meeting. But based on what you told me so far, I would support at least requesting out of the legislature, and then we can take subsequent steps from that.
All right.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, though, like Mr. Newell, suggested, you can cover it up, you can do things. If this was just a monument to a person that said Meriwether on it with no inscription, we're not having a discussion. That's my personal belief. But because of the inscription, I believe that's what it is. I don't know everybody's feelings in the community, just my own, but I think it's the inscription. I do believe the other men should be included. Now, how we do that, I don't know, but like Kevin said, you're not alone. I mean, I share, that belief too, but we do need to at least take the step to say, hey, state, is this yours or is it ours? And then the discussion once that time is made.
And I also agree with what Kevin and Eric saying. If I sort of had my way, it would come down. I just think it's horrible wording on there. And like I said, first of all, the young man is not even from North Augusta. And I just, like I said, I want us to take the proper steps. And I think, just like you said, we find out who actually belongs to the monument. And if it was a gift to the city of North Augusta, if I gave any of you a gift and you did not like it, then you have the right to get rid of it. And so, but I do think we as council, we need to come together and just the things Kelly said maybe an executive session or open. It doesn't matter to me, but and just discuss all of our feelings on this monument. But I think, like I said, the first thing we need to do is to find out who the monument belongs to, and then go from there.
I would take the time to agree that, ownership is probably a big key in making a decision on what to do and how to move forward. That's part of the challenge I've had the whole time is just whatever action we would like to take, let's just make sure it's legal and that we don't have any recourse on it as much as possible. I mean, no matter what we do, I believe there's going to be some recourse, but we want to try to minimize that as much as possible on the legal end, and then do what we can to, eradicate the problem that we have or the issue that we have and move forward. I'm glad that we had the discussion. All the information is very good. I've read through all the documents we've received and learned a lot about the legal process of where we are. But I guess we just got to keep on gathering some information, I guess. And I definitely would like to see us move forward with truing up the ownership so we can make a better decision on some of it.
Well, I also think that the ownership is the main question that needs to be answered first. And I think we need to rely on our city attorney's advice and move forward before we even plant our own seeds. So, about the monument, but I really think that the first step would be on determining the ownership of it, and I will leave that with Kelly.
I would agree with that too. I think the first thing, depending on whatever we do, if we establish that we do in fact own the monument, it clears the path for us to do whatever we do in the end, no matter what that is. But again, the ownership issue is the critical issue right now, I think.
Okay. I think I've heard from everybody. So I guess Kelly and council, what I heard was the consensus is pursue trying to establish if the legislature still owns the monument. Exactly the wording of that, Kelly, I'd leave to you as to how to phrase that question to them. And I heard some discussions. I believe that the only discussion we can have in executive session would be the one about any litigation, whatever the right word would be. If we decided to take litigation and ask for a declaratory judgment that it is ours, and then go to court, that certainly is an executive session question. I believe the rest of this is clearly a study session and council meeting open to the public. Am I correct in that, Kelly?
To a great extent. The one thing, if we talk about doing a declaratory judgment action, that certainly we would discuss an executive, because that's where we're talking about bringing an action. But I think that there may be some discussion that might have to be had about litigation that I think may be filed against us based upon certain actions we might take. So it may be a little more involved than just the declaratory judgment.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm so accustomed to thinking about actions that we're taking, not considering actions that may be taken against us, although there's been a number in the recent history, so I should not have overlooked that. But I think that's a reasonable and a considered approach for us to follow. And Kelly, I'd ask you and Rachel and Jim Clifford when he gets here to get your heads together, and I'd like to be in a conversation and put together what that request might look like and exactly how we would ask the legislature and what we would be asking them, and get it back to council for a decision. I think that's and we'll provide it, council, in as much advance as we can, so that you'll have an opportunity to review it and to ask questions, because it's I found in my brief time on this earth that when you get involved in legal issues, the turn of a single word can make a big difference. And so we appreciate Kelly's expertise in that, and I think the inputs tonight have all been good. We've been living with this. I've been living with it now for over 3 years. It's, I would like somehow a consideration for what I think is the report that was given tonight, because I think there's some good suggestions in there, some good initiatives that we can take, and we'll be investigating them and evaluating them for the future. So let's proceed in that regard. Are there any other comments before we go? Seeing none, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you all very, very much. I appreciate it. And Trina, special thanks to you.